What's up guys, it's Taneli here. In this video I will explain how I paint photorealistic art using only Microsoft Paint. As a reference I will be using this photo of a kingfisher bird, however to make it a better fit to a YouTube screen I have also cropped the photo and made it a bit brighter. Now if you're looking for a complete beginner tutorial about Microsoft Paint, there is a link to my longer paint along tutorial down in the video description. That being said, today's topic is photorealism, so let's get started. Before we get started with the background, I quickly want to say a thing about the resolution and the size of the canvas. I'm painting this on a 1500 x 850 pixel size canvas because it's pretty much the biggest I can fit on my screen. If you want to paint realism on Microsoft Paint, the bigger the canvas size, the less pixelated the end result will look like. Now that's out of the way, so let's start with the background. I start by selecting the paint bucket tool and then open the edit colors to select the base color for the background. I'm using the reference photo as a guidance and pick a color that to me seems like a good midtone to use as a baseline. In this case it will be green with slightly yellowish hue, and then I fill the whole canvas using this color. Next I click on the brushes selection and switch to using a colored pencil brush and then select a darker color with the edit colors tool. Then I make the brush size as big as possible by holding down Ctrl key and then the plus key on my keyboard. I always recommend using Ctrl and either plus or minus key to adjust the brush size because it gives you more size options than the toolbar size selection does. Next, I start tapping in color all over the background. Basically at this stage my only aim is to give the background texture and more hues and values instead of having it all be just a block of one color. I'm using the reference photo as a guidance, but mostly I'm just drawing the brush strokes in rather randomly. Once I've gone through the whole canvas with one color, I add another even darker one. My idea here is to place the darkest areas of the background in the corners of the canvas, which makes the viewer automatically focus their view more on the center. Next I keep adding in more colors, more hues and more texture to the background. I select colors that are stronger than in the reference photo on purpose, because later when I start blending it all together most of the saturation will be lost and the colors will be less distinct from each other. Once I feel like there is enough color and texture on the canvas, it's time to start blending it all together. Blending colors on Microsoft Paint can be a rather tedious process, so in order to make that a bit easier, I start including my tools in the quick access toolbar. The way you can do this is by right-clicking any tool on your toolbar and then selecting the option Add to Quick Access Toolbar. When done, you can access these tools by tapping F10 button on your keyboard and then press the number that is given to each tool. This makes it possible to change the tools without moving your mouse, which makes blending a lot less annoying task. For example, I add my eyedropper tool to shortcut slot number 8, so every time I want to select the eyedropper tool, I tap F10 and then number 8 on my keyboard. Once you get comfortable with this, you can change tools extremely fast using just one hand without even moving your mouse. So the way I blend in colors together is by selecting the eyedropper tool using the quick access toolbar and then pick a random color from my canvas. Once the color is selected, the program will automatically switch to using your previous brush, which should now be the colored pencil brush. So you can then start smudging in the colors because the brush is slightly transparent and blends with whatever is underneath it. Then I just repeat the process selecting another color from the canvas with the eyedropper tool and do a few brush strokes. The way this works is a bit similar to what would happen if you were smudging your pastel pencil drawings with your hand. Since you are not adding any new colors to the canvas but instead always selecting something that is already there, the longer you repeat this, the more everything will blend together. Now all you have to decide is how much you want to blend everything versus how much texture you want to leave. I personally prefer to paint more photorealistic pieces, so I tend to blend everything a lot, but there is an argument to be made for leaving in more painterly textures if that fits your style better. If you want to blend things really smooth, you will have to do this for a while and later maybe switch to an even smaller brush. Anyways, that's it for the background, let's move on to the next step. Now that I have a basic background done for the painting, it's time to do the basic shapes and colors for the bird. I would argue that this is the most important stage of any painting, so I would recommend you to take as much time as you need to get the proportions down. I personally prefer to paint freehand, but I'll demonstrate how I mentally visualize the proportions using the reference image. If you find painting freehand difficult, feel free to add as many measurement lines on your canvas as you need. Anyway, first I determine where the bird should be on the painting with a center point. Center point is where a vertical and horizontal line placed on the middle of the canvas would meet. Next, I visualize how big I should draw the bird by placing it in a square box that just barely fits the whole bird inside it. Once I know the size and placement of the bird, I'll break it down to the simplest possible shapes. This way I have simplified to myself what I actually need to draw on the canvas and not get lost with all the details. The good thing about breaking things into simple shapes is that when you're drawing, you can use both the shapes of the bird, as colored in red here, as well as the shapes created by the negative space, as colored in blue, around the bird to create an accurate representation of the proportions. And when I'm drawing the bird on the actual canvas, I'm using the shapes tool and the white color to draft the outlines because it stands out from the background. So now that I have the basic proportions down, it's time to do the base colors. I do this by breaking the picture down to just a few main colors that I see. This way I have again simplified the picture to make it easier for myself to paint. By focusing only on the main colors, I have simplified the image to simple shapes that I just have to place correctly on the canvas. Then I start placing the colors using the same pencil brush that I used for the background. Once I have colored the whole bird, I start looking at the reference photo for the darkest areas to start including some darker shadows to my painting by using darker colors. Once I have the main shadows down, I do the same with the highlights using lighter colors. Once I feel like the painting as a whole is starting to come together and the bird is starting to actually look like a bird, it's time to move on to the next step of the painting, which is painting the details. This is the stage when we are going to turn this sketch of a bird into a realistic one. This might seem like an intimidating task, but it's actually fairly simple if you just took enough care with the proportions and base shapes during the previous stage. Because all this step boils down to is filling all these small shapes with even smaller shapes. I do all of the painting on this stage using the same pencil brush that I've been using on the previous stages. I start by selecting an area to work on, like the beak of the bird for example, and then look at the reference to see what the beak actually looks like. Then I just try to transfer what I see on the reference to my painting. When I'm painting, I like to think that I'm just trying to add something to my canvas that enhances what is already there. It doesn't have to be perfect, but if it's better than what was there previously, it's good enough for me. This way I can just keep adding colors, painting things, and then painting over them again to slowly inch closer and closer to the final result. This means that one of the most important aspects when painting realistic art is the time that you are willing to put into your work. Generally speaking, the more time you are willing to put into your artwork, the better it's going to look like when it's finished. What this step boils down to is observing the reference photo and then trying to recreate what you see on the canvas. For this reason, I think it's a good idea to pick one area at a time and focus on it until it looks right. Making the painting look realistic is something you can only get better at with practice. However, one tip I can tell you is that in order to paint realistic art, you don't have to copy everything on the reference photo one-to-one. Most of the time it's much more important to try to capture the essence of the texture, like for example in this case the feathers of the bird, than to place them perfectly in the correct place. I do this by doing downwards brush strokes in the same direction, which makes the bird look puffy with a soft feathery texture, even though at a closer inspection it doesn't necessarily look the same as the reference. You can pretty much always do this regardless whether you're trying to paint feathers or hair or waves in the water, etc. It's much more important to try to capture the defining shapes or textures than to get every feather or hair in the exactly right place. So take your time and feel free to paint over as many times as you feel like you need to. The final step of my painting process is the cleaning up phase, where I go through the whole painting one last time to fix any mistakes I might have made during the previous steps or add a little bit of artistic flair to the painting. Basically what this boils down to is looking at the painting I made and then deciding if there is something I would still like to change. Usually I don't make any big changes at this stage, but usually focus on things like blending out sharp transitions, adding small highlights or details that I feel would enhance the painting. This is also the stage during which I often go blend the background a little bit more if I feel like it still looks too rough. All in all, this is the simple breakdown of my Microsoft Paint painting process. Hope you found this explanation/tutorial helpful or inspiring, so let me know your thoughts in the comments. Leaving a like would help me with the YouTube algorithm, and make sure to click that subscribe button if you'd be interested in more art-related content, including tutorials, art challenges, painting videos, and more. That being said, I thank you for watching this video, and here is the final painting for this week.